Okay, this is Chairman Mike McCoo of the Willington Board of Finance, calling to order the meeting of Thursday, June 17th, 2021 at 7:05 PM. We do not have any alternates to seat right now, and so we'll move on to approval of minutes. We have minutes from June 8th, and I have reviewed them. I have no additions or corrections. So for discussion, I'll move that we accept the minutes of June 8th as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Stephanie. Discussion? No more additions or corrections? All right, let's vote.
Pete,
Yes.
Jeff,
Abstain.
Matt,
Abstain.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes. So what do we have right now for account?
3 yes, 2 abstain.
Okay. Do minutes go by simple majority, or do we have to have I think simple majority, right? We don't have to have a quorum vote for that. I think Erica's nodding yes.
Sorry, it's a majority vote.
Okay. So then the motion passes.
Okay. And the last meeting was a special meeting, so we also have the May 20th minutes.
Oh, I have not reviewed those.
Mike, can we table those till next time? Because I haven't reviewed them either.
I move that we table the acceptance of the May 20 minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All right.
Matt,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
5 yes.
All right, so we've tabled May 20. Hang on, I'm just making notes. Okay, is that it, Marissa, for minutes?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Christina, sound check?
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to present to speak. As we normally do, those of you who have video, if you wish to be on video, feel free to wave and we will call you. And hang on, keep in mind I have 2 screens right now, so just bear with me. Lori Semperbon.
Lori Semperbon, 271 Turnpike Road. I just would like to thank the Board of Finance for all of the time you've put in, including the recording secretary for, getting to this budget. I know the last year and a half has been brutal with extra meetings and not knowing what's happening, and you folks have put in a lot of time. And Mike, I really appreciate your leadership. I think you are a calm, reasoned chair, and I think that makes these meetings go much more smoothly. So thank all of you.
Thank you, that's appreciated, and keep in mind you're part of that effort. So thank you. Other people in video present to speak, wave your hand, please. I don't think I see any more. So if anyone else is not in video, but you're calling in or using a computer without video and you would like to speak, please unmute and call out your name. We'll make sure we get to you. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. Okay, so let's move on to old business. Public health crisis update. Particularly update on federal funding, American Rescue Plan. Erica, is there anything new since we last talked?
On federal funding, we anticipate before July 1st having the first tranche of funding in the amount of $867,727.11. We applied for it, and we were told to expect it before July 1 so that it's within this fiscal year, so that the state can pass it through currently. So we don't have the funds yet, but we are setting up process accounting wise with Donna and Lori, where to put those funds, whether it be a separate bank account or just a separate fund, to make reporting easy and transparent.
Okay, so just for clarity on process, it sounds like the funding comes to us, but then we still have some process to make use of it. We still have to access it and follow a certain guidance. That money isn't just available to take, right?
So it's available to take as long as we follow our normal process. So what would need to happen in order to utilize those funds is we would have to go through the process as we would any other federal or state grant funds. What's different between this and the first set of COVID relief funds is that we spent money out of the budget and then reimbursed with those dollars. In the midst of the pandemic, I anticipate that those orders will be over. And in order to spend this money, we will have to go back through a process where projects will be determined at more than likely the Board of Selectmen level, ask for funding appropriation at the Board of Finance level, then to call the town meeting, ask the Board of Selectmen to call a town meeting, and then we'd have a town meeting. So depending on what we decide to do with them, it would make most sense to go in with a plan at town meeting as opposed to project by project.
Okay, so just for clarity, this 800 and some thousand number you said,
Mhm.
is that our money or are we just holding it?
Oh, no, it's our money to be used under the guidelines that I shared with you all in the interim final rule. Be very easy to read, 151-page guidelines. And we're still getting more information there, just released, just hot off the press this evening. Some more information on reporting and what that will look like. But we are getting the funds. It will not be reimbursable. Treasury disperse the funds to the state, and the state is just a pass-through, and they will release them to all municipalities.
So if we find 800 and some thousand dollars worth of projects that meet the guidance, we can use it all. If
That
for
is correct.
we can come up with only 400,000, then at the end of the fiscal year, does the money go
No.
back?
No, we have until December 31st, 2024 to encumber these funds and until 2026 to actually spend them. So it's not as though we need to spend them in the next month or two. We have several
Okay.
years.
Okay, so the question I'm trying to get to though is if we don't have enough things that meet the guidance, even if it's over all the years of the plan, what happens with the money at the end?
We'd have to give it back.
Okay, all right, that's what I'm trying to understand. Okay, thank you for
They
that.
want you to spend it. So I have a feeling we will find ways to spend the dollar.
I'm sure we're gonna try.
And Erica, that's more than half, right, of the total amount there?
It's their half. So
Maybe.
our portion, if I turn around, it's because I'm reading off the board, I want to make sure I give the right amount. Our total is $1,735,424.24. That is our non-entitlement unit money, as well as a portion of the county dollars. And we will get it in those two. I don't think they're equal because they don't add up to 24 cents, but they're pretty darn close. Again, so two equal payments to the town of Willington, $867,727.11. We applied for the first portion, and then a year from now, we'll be able to apply for the second half.
Okay,
And
great,
all the state is doing is passing through. They are not putting any limitations or rules on how the money is spent. They are simply a pass-through.
thank you. What is the last unemployment number that you had? And I'm sorry, I meant to look it up today, but I did not.
If you give me 1 second, I will
Okay.
look while we're here.
All right,
Look, I looked, it was about, I think, 6%.
The April number, the May number is not out yet, probably within the next couple of days. The May number was 200 individuals at a 6.6%, just sorry, 6% even. And our workforce was assumed 3,347 individuals with 3,147 employed. So when I last did a comparison to last March, we are pretty close to the numbers last March. So we had a large influx and we start to see a decline. So I'll be curious to see the May numbers.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other board members, anything else on public health crisis update? Discussion, questions, information?
I think our restaurant, Rail and something closed. Is that true?
They closed, and I think it's partial, some due to the pandemic and some due to the family relocating,
Yes.
the owners, so.
I talked to the owner today, as a matter of fact, and that is exactly correct. One of the members of the family got a professorship way out of state.
Yeah.
And they are moving to Iowa. And they are also have battled a tough year plus with the COVID. So it's a double whammy.
They will be sadly missed.
Yes.
It will be.
Rare to have.
On- On that score though, and maybe this is in the economic development bailiwick or something, some of that American Rescue money, I'm thinking could be used to inspire a potential new restaurant or other business owner at that site. Because I think that commercial center of the town is under some duress right now for multiple reasons. But that's a big one is Track 9, of course, or River and Rail, I'm sorry. And what a meeting place that has been for people in town for decades. So I'm hoping there's something there that we could do smartly to maybe engage someone who's ready to go into the restaurant business again as things look like they're going to turn upward. So.
Any other board comments? Okay, let's move on to item 2 of old business, motion to affirm transfer from fund balance. As board members saw in their communications, we didn't actually make a formal motion previously, although we agreed in sort of general consensus on what the number was, but Donna felt that it was appropriate that we actually make a motion for the transfer. So based on the language she emailed out to us this afternoon, I would like to move to affirm application of fund balance to the fiscal year 22 budget by applying $1,055,230 from the fund balance to the fiscal year 21-22 budget.
I'll second.
Oh,
Any discussion on the motion? All right, let's vote.
Jeff,
Sounds like a record, yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Christina,
Yes.
Stephanie.
yes.
That's 6 yes, 0 no, motion passes.
All right. Item 3 on old business, Talmadge property, grant update.
Yeah, okay. Good evening. Pete Anderson and Kathy Demers here again from Conservation Commission. It's great to be here. Thanks for having us. So we'll bring you up to date on the Talmadge property. And we have a request to make regarding funding. But why don't maybe Kathy can give us a quick summary of what we see as the timeline at this point. Grants have been announced, and so we are in the ready to roll on doing an application. So Kathy maybe can run through a quick timeline and what we see as a projection where this is going to go.
Thanks, Pete. So the grant, new grant round opened on June 3rd, and we're starting to work on the grant. The application is due by September 30th. So we have about 4 months to get that grant to DEEP. After that, they take 6 months to review all the grant applications. And then those with the highest ranking are the ones that will get funded. They are not able to tell us right now how much money is in that pot. They said that they have asked for $5 million from the bond commission. After the 6-month review, I asked Deep how much longer after that it would take for them to announce the grant awards. And I was told that it could be a couple of additional months because it has to go through Deep Commissioner's office as well as the governor's office before they announce. So it could be as late as the summer or fall of 2022. So next year, about a year from when the applications actually are due. And then what we would do is once we hear back from the grant award, as we had talked, you know, we're predicating going forward with the purchase on getting at least some type of grant award. We're hoping for 50%, but as we told you last time, the last grant round, they only funded 30 to 40%. But should we get a grant award, what we do next is we would go forward with the A2 survey. And then there's other paperwork we'd have to submit to the state of Connecticut before they would release the funds. So it's possible, again, the release of funds might not happen till as late as spring of 2023. And so we're coming back now because the grant round is open. We'd like to move forward with working with the family to do the purchase and sales agreement as well as the title search. Those are documents that will be required for the grant application. And wanted just to apprise you of, you know, the timeline. As far as when we can literally close on the property, Deep has told us that once the application process has closed, so as of 30th of September, technically towns or land trusts can then go ahead and close on the property if they wish to do that before the grant awards, or they can wait to hear for the grant award, but they don't have to. But traditionally, the town of Wellington has done that with the other purchases, so.
Okay, and we'll be apprising the Talmadge members of the Talmadge family and the Talmadge estate of this timeline. It's possibly a little more extended than what we've put forth to them prior. We're hoping that they are still going to be in agreement with the town purchasing their property. So we will need assurance from them before we go too much further. But as Kathy said, the next step is the purchase and sales agreement, which will require some attorney's fees, and there'll be other fees. We are predicating the purchase on the assumption we're going to get some grant money. The town, of course, if it finds extra money, may want to lock up this purchase ahead of time in any case. But at this point, we'll put it in terms of first getting approval for or getting a grant award. So we need some money to move forward, and what we're asking this evening is that the Board of Finance request of the Board of Selectmen to hold a town meeting to approve $60,000 from the open space account for use in these document such as the purchase and sales agreement. And at this point, we won't go forward with the inexpensive survey until we know we have the grant and are ready to go further down the road. So our request this evening is that you suggest or request the Board of Selectmen to hold a town meeting for that $60,000 approval.
And that's what's in the CIP plan at this point for the, you know, toward the purchase using open space funds.
Okay, thank you, both. Board members, Stephanie, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to move that to request that the Board of Selectmen call a town meeting to appropriate $60,000 from the open space fund to use for the costs associated with the purchase of the Talmadge estate property on Mason Road, including the survey and legal fees.
Can we get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Christina. Discussion from board members?
Yes.
Pete?
I, just for confirmation, this is the property on Mason Road.
Mhm.
Yeah, I said that in the motion. Or you,
You said Talmadge property, I believe. I'm just.
no, I said
confirming it.
Talmadge Estate property on Mason Road.
Oh, I'm sorry, Stephanie. I missed the second
That's
part of
okay.
that.
It's a good thing. I wrote it in there. On
All right.
purpose.
Thank you.
Other board discussion? Matt?
Yes, so is this, I think I heard 30 to 40% approval, so is that correct? So the state last year or historically approves 30 to 40% of the grants they receive from towns for open space, is that right?
Traditionally, it's been 50%. And when we first came to the Board of Finance last fall, we discussed that, that's what we were hoping to get is up to 50%. But after that point, they announced the grants for last year in February, and the grant awards that came in were 30 to 40% of the total purchase price. So traditionally, it's been 50%.
Oh, so it's, I misunderstood. I thought this was 30 to 40% of the grants that were submitted were approved. You're saying
Oh,
it's not
no,
correct.
actually, last year, all of the grant applications did receive money. All of them did.
Okay,
But prior to that, sometimes it's the ones that rank the highest. Some of it depends on how much money they end up having in the whole open space pot, if you will, because some of it comes from bond funds, some of it comes from Community Investment Act funds. So depending on where the state gets its funding each year, determines how much money is in that pot.
thank you.
Any other discussion? Erica?
Can I ask a question? I know, Peter and Kathy, in your email, you referenced the rest of the funds that would come out of CIP, the $100,000 and $1,000. Do you need town approval of those funds as part of the grant application?
It helps because whenever we can show that the town has made a commitment to having the funds, it gives you additional points on the grant. So that would be a good thing. I mean, we could, and the other thing is if we're going to do a town meeting, maybe it makes sense to actually move to appropriate those funds as well, even though we're not going to be using them right away.
I wonder, I know in some state grants, I know on the school side, they usually need that authorization from the legislative body of the town. So if that's the case in this grant, I'd ask this board to consider 2 separate motions to be included in the town meeting.
One being the motion that we're discussing right now, correct? Okay. All right, so let's finish with this motion. Any more discussion?
I have a question about the other thing. Should I wait?
Yes, because we're talking about the motion you already made. So you have to bite at the apple right now. Okay, Marissa, let's vote.
Jeff, Jeff,
Sorry, I was indisposed. Yes.
Christina,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes,
Stephanie,
Yes.
Pete,
I think I'm going to abstain only because I have a conflict of interest here. This would be very much in my advantage for this to pass, and I don't think I can.
okay,
I think I have a problem there, so I'm going to abstain.
and Mike.
Yes.
5 yes, 1 abstain, motion passes.
Okay, on the topic of the second motion, do we have an idea of what that would look like? I think we need to, not only do we have to get the wording right, but I think it may be important to have some sort of circuit breaker language in there saying on the condition of grant approval or something to that effect.
Well, my question too is about the amount, because depending on what percent of the price the grant covers,
Yeah.
won't we have to have an exact amount
Yeah.
for this or not?
Also, is there a time limit? I mean, how long after something's approved by the town, when does it sunset? Does it go forever? I mean,
That would depend on what fund we put the money in. If we approve the project, we could put it in a fund that crosses over fiscal years versus not. So
And it's non-lapsing.
that's a good question, Matt. Kathy, you were going to comment?
I was just gonna say, in terms of the caveat of saying, dependent upon a grant, I'm not sure that that's the best thing to do in terms of when the state looks at the motion or the vote, but certainly you can do that. As we said, we have some options. We can put it in the purchase and sales agreement that we would not move forward with the purchase unless we did get a grant. And we've done that before in the purchase and sales agreement. I've never seen it in the call for the town meeting before. So.
Okay. So we don't, I don't have a particular stake in how it's worded. The only reason I brought that up was where our ability to say yes or no ends. So we don't have the ability to force you to put it in the sales agreement, the purchase and sale agreement.
I see, yeah. Mhm.
And maybe we're okay with that, but we've talked about this entire thing all the way through, that this project was dependent on receiving grant money, that was your goal from the Conservation Commission also.
Mhm. Right.
So I'm not sure how to word it. It's really just a matter for discussion.
I believe the purchase and sales agreement is with the town, and so if the town puts that language in there, then your motion, regardless of amount, would not supersede the purchase and sales agreement that says that the funding is only available if a grant is awarded, or something to that aspect.
So Erica, what you're saying is you will make sure that it's in the purchase and sale agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that was always the intent of the Conservation Commission when they brought this project both to the selectmen and to this board.
Okay. Do we have an idea what that motion needs to look like?
I think you could just substitute, in Stephanie's motion, it could say, the Board of Finance recommends to the Board of Selectmen to call a town meeting to approve an appropriation of $101,000 from the reserve fund to be used for the cost associated with the purchase of the Talmadge Estate property on Mason Road.
I would like to move that. Should you want me to repeat it? I'm
Sure.
happy to.
Marissa, do you have it?
I will. Yes.
Can I get a second on the motion? I'll second the motion for discussion. Okay, discussion on the motion.
Can we hear that again, please?
Hear the motion?
Yes.
I move to request that the Board of Selectmen call a town meeting to appropriate $101,000 from the reserve fund to use for the costs associated with the purchase of the Talmadge Estate property on Mason Road.
Yeah. This is for actually, if the grant comes through, paying for our portion of it. Is that correct?
Right.
The way it's worded, it could be spent for anything. It could be spent for environmental assessments or I don't know.
Well, it said for the purchase, right? The grant,
I think I said
the
for the
motion
costs
says for the
associated with the purchase.
Oh, okay.
I can remove the costs associated with and just for the purchase of, if that's.
Probably makes no difference. Thank you.
I'll agree to that friendly amendment.
Okay.
I second.
And I'll be friendly.
Thank you. Any more board discussion on the motion? Let's vote.
Pete, are you abstaining still?
I am abstaining again, thank you.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Christina?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
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 Okay, sorry, it got weird. And Mike?
Yes.
Okay, 5 yes, 1 abstain, motion passes.
For town meeting sake, can I get the wording of those or that motion, Marissa, sooner?
Yeah, I will send that to you this evening.
Thanks so much.
Mr. Anderson, Mr. Mers, anything else?
I think that's it. We appreciate these actions, and we'll be trying to crank out an application over the coming months.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your support.
You're welcome. Okay, next on the agenda, old business item 4, ambulance service to the town of Union. Sub-item A is the letter from Wellington Fire Department number 1 from Mr. Gantick. We invited Mr. Gantick to come to the meeting. Would you like to speak?
I'm gonna let Chief Moore speak. He's got some figures for you, he's got the answers to your questions. And when he's done
Miss-
speaking,
Ron,
we've
hang
invited
on a
Tyler
second.
Millets to be
Ron?
on this meeting also. Tyler was
Ron?
chief when this PSA with Union was initiated, so he's got the scoop on it.
You guys have got an echo, sir? There's a big echo there. We missed the first couple of sentences of what you said.
I fixed it because they were in the same room. We were getting feedback, but I muted Tyler. So if he repeats
That's
that,
what fixed it?
yeah, it should be fine if he can repeat himself.
Okay, can you start over again, Ron? Sorry.
Sure. I'm gonna turn this over to Chief Moore. He's got the information that you requested. When he finishes, we're gonna authorizing Tyler to speak on behalf of the department. Tyler was chief at the time when the PSA for Union was put into effect, and he's got some more information that he can share with you. So, go ahead, Alex.
Mike, for time's sake, do you want me just to have Tyler go through everything? That way he can just, he has all the same figures that I have and can probably answer your questions a lot better than.
Whatever works for you guys.
Yeah, we'll just have Tyler go through it and Ron or I will jump in if we need to.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
I can.
Yes.
Oh, let me turn up my volume just a little bit here. All right, before we get started, Mr. Chairman, did you receive our correspondence that we sent to you in the Board of Finance dated May 22nd? We didn't get a response that you actually received it, and we were hoping that we'll get an acknowledgement that you did receive our letter.
If you're referring to the letter from President Gantick about the concerns about communicating with Union, is that what you're referring to?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're specifically asking that question because there was as I'm sure you know, there was another communication to the town of Union after this letter was sent. So we're a little perplexed as to how that happened.
Yes, well, I think perplexed is probably a good word for a few of us here, but yes, the communication has been acknowledged, partly by the fact that I communicated with Mr. Gantick once in person at an event in town saying I'd like to help clear up any misunderstandings, and also in email to Mr. Gantick indicating that he was invited to this meeting to talk about his concerns that were presented in the letter. So those are the ways it was acknowledged.
Okay. All right. You did then send some correspondence or some questions, I guess, out regarding the history of the PSA and union. Did all the board members receive that as well, or was that something that you just sent out to us?
No, the communication that went out to Chief Moore and to any of the communication about this topic has been shared with board members also. One of the things is you wouldn't necessarily always see it because we use a blind CC system to prevent any accidental illegal meetings by having people doing reply alls.
Yeah. I was just making sure that we're all on the same page. So there's no one that's going to be surprised or repeat any questions that you already asked in the communication that you sent. That's all. So
Yeah, we have, hopefully we have our communications set here on the board.
Okay, do you have yours in front of you, your letter of the questions you sent?
I have papers all over my table here, but if you want to get started, I will make sure that I have it on my screen.
Yeah, you want me just, rifle through them and answer questions at the end, or do you want to take them one by one? What's your pleasure?
Offer whatever you can. Just the whole idea of that was to try to get a better understanding. We started this conversation back in May of 2020 with Chief Moore in trying to understand kind of how it works. That was when we first asked about what was the agreement. Over time, we clarified that there wasn't specifically an agreement with union, that it was that the fire department holds the PSA with the state of Connecticut. So those are things we've learned over time. And since President Gantick's letter, it was clear we needed to talk about this more. And so we thought, while we're talking about it, let's understand the numbers. You know, like he brought up the fact that it brings in $22,000 of revenue. That's great information for us to have. So we're looking at what is, a little more detail.
Okay, well, I'll go through them. So your first question was, what year was the PSA established with the state? It was 2008. It was an agreement between Union, Wellington Fire Department #1, and OEMS, which is the State Department of Public Health Office of Emergency Medical Services. So the little bit of history about that, and this, your second question was, established this arrangement or approved it. So at the time, AMR, which is a private ambulance company, had the PSA for Union, which they inherited from Superior Ambulance in Stafford way back when. And there's probably only one person on this call that remembers Superior, and that's Mike McCoo. So Superior had it, and they had it for many, many years. But before that, I believe it was Intervenes, believe it or not. Intervenes Funeral Home had an ambulance back then. So Superior got it. When AMR bought out Superior, AMR took over the PSA. The AMR continually failed in providing coverage in the PSA in the town of Union. So what ends up happening in cases like that mutual aid gets called. So Wellington was running all the EMS calls in Union anyway. And there started to be some friction between AMR and OEMS, and frankly us, because we knew that they had the PSA, and AMR wanted out of it. The state of Connecticut was extremely eager to have us take it. And frankly, at the time, we started discussing the pros and cons of having the PSA in Union, and the fact that, there was a potential income stream there. And any income that comes in, as you know, from the insurance billing goes into Fund 17, which indirectly assists both fire departments in the purchasing of capital assets. So, we actually agreed to take over the PSA, which made the state extremely happy, because OEMS, frankly, there's 169 towns in the state of Connecticut. Their goal is to never have an open PSA. And frankly, they, to the best of my knowledge and my experience tells me, they will not allow an open PSA. Every single town has to have a PSA assigned to it. So in 2008, we agreed to take over the PSA, again, because we were going there every single call anyway. So it was almost, really a non-issue. All it really did was solidify our presence up there. And that, for whatever reason, if there was an increase in revenue, if the insurance industry decided that they were going to double, triple the rates that were allowable, that we saw that as a positive. And that, again, that was money that automatically comes back to the town and gets injected to Fund 17 anyway. So we saw it as a win.
Can I just ask a question, Tyler?
Sure. Sure.
I would assume also that one of the advantages of you having the PSA is, instead of waiting for the dispatch center to have to call AMR, AMR to determine that their ambulance was wherever and unavailable.
Right.
And then move to the next step to call you for what was that time mutual aid. That whole process was sped up. So service to the town of Union was improved because you would get called faster, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes what gets lost in translation is when you're emergency services, you forget you're in emergency services and getting the right asset to the person that needs it as quickly as possible. There's no doubt about it. Union's in a pickle. It's an extremely small town. Their neighbors are Massachusetts, Woodstock, and Stafford, in some cases, a small section of Willington. So, we do work with them a lot, even prior to the PSA, because of their small manpower pool, as well as they're just a small town and they have a big chunk of the interstate. So, in the spirit of public safety and getting the right people there as quickly as possible, that was another part of our decision process on the PSA, because you're absolutely correct. We would, the dispatch center will call AMR, hey, you got to call in Union. Oh, we're in East Hartford. Is that good? Well, for who? It's not good for the patient, I can tell you that. So, and us being in close proximity to the highway, it's a very quick run for us to get up to there. So good point. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Were you chief at the time, Tyler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. So your next question was how many calls per year are conducted in Union versus total calls per year. We responded to 80 calls in Union in the last year, out of the total of almost 800 calls. So it's a relatively small percentage. 41 of those calls were residents of Union and 39 were on the interstate or the state parks. So as an interesting note, the town of Willington has received mutual aid 92 times during the same period, and we've given mutual aid to neighboring towns 94 times. So we were actually a little surprised to see that number when we ran the numbers from the CAD, that it was actually pretty balanced.
Hang on just a second, Tyler. Sorry to interrupt. Matt, you have a question?
Yeah, so am I understanding correctly that we your departments handle 80 calls to Union?
Correct. A year.
That there's 700 or 800 calls in total?
That's correct. And yep.
Which one is it, 7 or 8?
Just under 800.
So 10% of the calls are to
Just
Union.
about. Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, so go ahead, Tyler.
So and again, as I mentioned before, because we were on other calls, we received mutual aid 92 times, or that was a second ambulance or a third ambulance to an accident or something like that. Or the ambulance was out of service for maintenance, and we provided mutual aid out 94 times. Our biggest mutual aid provider into Willington, statistically, is UConn. In the last year, we've provided mutual aid ambulance service to UConn 3 or 4 times, where they've come into Willington about 50 times. So we do rely on UConn quite a bit, and so obviously it's the mutual aid system, which that's the way it works, but we're not we don't pay UConn anything for that type of coverage or coming in that many times. As far as the revenue of those calls produced, we previously mentioned we take in just about $22,000 this year. There are still outstanding balances. We did check the numbers with our billing company, and there's another outstanding 7,000 or 8,000. So we're on target for about $30,000 for this year. Which again, as I mentioned before, that money, any insurance revenue goes into Fund 17, which is used strictly for the capital purchases for the 2 fire departments.
Yeah, Matt, you have a question, Matt?
Yeah, so 7,000 or 8,000 is non-paid.
Yeah, it's outstanding billing to the insurance companies, and they take their sweet time paying. So
what's your experience with simply not getting paid for calls?
Say that one more time.
What's your experience been not getting paid for calls at all?
What's that?
Not getting.
Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna pause for a second. I'm gonna let Alex answer that question. Hold on 1 second, Matt. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we average 87 to 90% collection rate between the town and Union together. There's always some, whether it be motor vehicle or people have passed away that we just can't collect money off of, and we never send anybody to collections. So it's about 87 to 89 or so percent that we collect.
Got it. Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Pete Tanaka, you had a question?
Yeah, I may be confused here. Is there an advantage to holding the PSA other than
We lost you, Pete.
that to hold that because it's worth a cash payment, or do they want that just so they're the first one called? I don't
No.
understand.
Yeah, the PSA really has nothing to do with billing. The PSA it simply states that they have a permanent ambulance response in their area.
Right.
It's
Right.
not related to billing at all.
I understand that, but as I understand it, Eastford pays some nominal amount to AMR because AMR holds their PSA.
No, Eastford contracted with KB, Killingly Brooklyn Ambulance. Previously,
Okay.
they had Ashford Ambulance.
Right. Is Killingly at an advantage holding that PSA? Are they paying just to hold the PSA?
Well, first of all, to be honest with you, I don't know if they have the PSA. I'm assuming that they do. As far as what they're paying, I think they are paying KB to be there. I'm not exactly sure what that figure is, but what you have to look at is what these guys look at is the amount of call volume that they're generating. I guess if you look at it in these terms, Eastford's average call volume, I'm going to take based on my experience, I'm going to take a guess that they're probably, 100 or 200 calls a year, maybe. And that's including fire and things like that. I don't know how much revenue that the KB is getting out of them. And for us, I think at the time, again, what we looked at was, if we're going there anyway, the PSA, just basically solidifies that we are the primary ambulance there. And frankly, again, we looked at every year you look at the revenues and, collecting $30,000 a year is certainly nothing
Right.
to sneeze at. I mean, it's a big.
I understand that. So the other question we had as a board, and I'm not sure whether this got communicated or not, was that we believe that we are paying for our ambulance for two reasons. One is for ambulance coverage in the town of Willington. And the second is that because both of those ambulance attendants, drivers, I know that's a bad term and I apologize, are first responding firefighters. Every time they're out of our precinct, use my terminology, it means that they're not available to respond to our call. So that's I understand that we're making revenue, but it's not a pure revenue. It's also a cost to us, and that's partly why we came up with these questions. And I'm not sure that Willington 1 was hearing some of that concern from us.
Well, it's as far as the call, the 80 calls that are up there that we respond to, the firefighter EMTs that are being paid whether they're sitting on a couch or sitting at the coffee table down there, or whether they're in union, they're still getting paid.
No, Tyler, I fully understand that. However, if they are in union on a call being paid for that, and we have a fire here in town at the same time, they are predisposed, and we've lost those two very first responders, as Chief Moore has made it abundantly clear to us that they are usually the first ones there with equipment.
Sure,
and we don't want to lose that. And
no, I understand that.
As that's a cost. So there's a cost benefit analysis here. It's not just merely a benefit.
Yeah, we do watch that. We do look at the statistics to find out, if it was tilted one way. Let's, for discussion's sake, let's say that there was some type of major development or a casino or something ends up going in union, and we're up there 400 times a year. That's a huge problem. We really have to rethink the process of what we're doing and how we're performing our task up there. Our experience tells us, and statistics tell us that, generally speaking, 3 or 4 times a year that occurs, that we're actually in union or in another town on mutual aid as well. That it probably happens more, being in other towns because of mutual aid. We're already on a call, so or we're in Stafford, we're in Holland, or we're in Ashford. We run a lot of mutual aid there too. So it's not only the consideration for union, because we go mutual aid all over the place.
Right, but I
so-
understand, I understand mutual aid, and it seems to me that we're confusing a contract to provide service with mutual aid, and I don't think that they're the same thing. I think that mutual aid is something that's totally necessary, and I fully understand why it's there, because nobody can cover all of the calls all of the time in the town. Nobody
Right.
can do that.
Correct.
Even with multiple full-time departments. So we need that, but to say that we're taking over the responsibility for another town because we're expecting the insurance revenue, I think that town is expecting an awful lot from us, because we're still paying for that ambulance, and as we've heard, Fund 17 does not fully fund our ambulance service.
It does not. It was never designed to.
I that's what I'm saying. It's never been designed to.
No.
But
no.
So we're paying more than what it costs, what we're returning, and then we're adding on additional service to another town who is only paying their insurance. You see what I'm saying?
I hear what you're saying. The fact of the matter, though, Pete, is take the PSA out of it for a minute. We're still going to go there the same amount of times every year, just like we do to Tolland, just like we do to Stafford, just like we do to Ashford. You're still going to go. It doesn't matter. Because if we don't have the PSA, we're going to go. We're going to go.
And some of these other surrounding Woodstock wouldn't pick up any of those calls?
No. They had, at the time when AMR wanted out of there, there was absolutely nobody that was interested in taking it. We only took it because we have to go. We're the closest. We would have to go anyway. So if you remove the phrase of the PSA out of the equation, just for discussion's sake, we're going to go anyway. We have to go. We're the closest ambulance to them.
So Tyler, I want to follow up a couple of things here, just to clean up conversation we've already had.
Sure.
Just to know where the question about Eastford comes from. At a previous meeting, I think it was February 11th, we were discussing all of this with Chief Moore, and he said it was his belief the AMR was covering Eastford since it was no longer Ashford. I think that's where we got that from, and he thought that it was maybe $50,000 or $60,000. Now, obviously, no one's holding him to any commitment to that. That was
It was KB.
It's KB, right?
KB,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know what the figure is.
Chief Moore said at the time he thought it was $50,000 or $60,000. So again, we're not holding it to any numbers.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, keep in mind too that whether it's AMR, whether it's AMR, KB, ASM, there's a little bit of a difference there, because they are for a for-profit EMS service, where it's a little bit of different classification. You know, they're out there strictly to make money and provide a good service, where we provide emergency service first, and if the insurance money comes later, that's fine. But
Sure. Christina had a question a while ago. You raised your hand, Christina. You're all set?
Oh, actually, no, I was just, is the 30,000 that comes in from union, is that roughly 10% of the total per year that goes into Fund 17? Like, does it correlate? Does the funds correlate with the number of calls?
We have to look. I would guess. I mean, I didn't actually look at do any analysis of the billing side of it, except for what our income from union residents or calls within the geographic boundaries of union were. I could certainly, get more information for you on that, but I don't have it in front of me. I don't want to guess and give you a bad number.
It's okay.
I know we're roughly 30, we're anticipating 30,000 being pumped into Fund 17 this year.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what we've collected already and based on the outstanding bills. And I should have said before, our average collection for each transport is about $471. So just for reference, that's what these actually amount to. Mike,
Stephanie,
back up.
question?
I'm sorry, Pete. Can you check with Pete to make sure? You all set, Pete?
I think so. I think I am all set. It's
Okay.
just that, like Mike McCool was saying about what Alex said. I remember the number not as 50,000, but as closer to 4,000. It was just something to provide coverage, you know, to be that first responder in town. I mean, we're paying a significant portion of our budget so that we can have first responders in town. And it's something that we very much want. Don't get me wrong at all here. But we're paying a lot of money for first responders in town. We want them in town.
Yep.
And if they're not going to be in town because of an agreement or a state mandate, I think that we need to prop up we need to make sure that we're not providing the taxpayers of the town of Willington provide for the town of Willington. I want to make sure that the taxpayers of the town of Willington are not providing for the town of Union. Do you understand our concerns and why we're looking at this?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. What I'm having difficulty, maybe I'm having difficulty relaying it. I don't want to try not to get hung up on the PSA or us being responsible for Union. Think of it from the mutual aid perspective. It's really no different, Pete. Whether we have that piece of paper that says we're the primary ambulance for Union or not is really immaterial. We're going to do those 80 calls anyway, whether we have the PSA or not, because no one's going to go.
Does the PSA require anything of us? I'm assuming the PSA is a type of contract, and in every type of contract, it requires both of the people in the contract to provide something. And
the PSA requires
by the PSA to provide response.
The PSA basically requires that we are the first ambulance called before an emergency in Union.
All right. So if we dissolve that PSA, we may not be the first ambulance. We may still be, like you said, 100% of the time, but we may not be.
You're going to be, because we were for 10 years.
So
before we took the PSA.
Tyler, having some understanding of the sort of the mutual aid lay of the land and all that, can you just, especially you, because of running the dispatch, you know how this works better than anybody here in this meeting tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Just help us understand, when we drive up the highway, we geographically see Ashford in between Willington and Union, even if it's a little slice of Ashford.
Right.
Also know that Sturbridge borders Union, and they have ambulance services very geographically close to Union.
Yep.
And then you have other towns around it. Why is it that Willington would always be getting called to cover it in mutual aid mode?
Well, excuse me, a couple of reasons. Sturbridge, there's when you start doing ambulance service across state lines, there's some reciprocity issues that pop up. First of all, second, you like you mentioned, you see Ashford in between Union and Willington. The Ashford ambulance is over on the far end of Route 89 and 44, nowhere near the highway. That's where they house their ambulance. It always has been there. It's going to continue to be there. So it appears that there will be another ambulance that will go there. But the fact of the matter is, when fire departments or ambulance services, in this case, fire departments, they have to develop a mutual aid plan. And their mutual aid plan involves providing, having a plan in place for ambulance mutual aid, fire mutual aid, for a major structure, for a structure fire. So in the ambulance mutual aid side, when you look and create your mutual aid plan that they submit to the dispatch center, they look at a multitude of factors. One of the factors is how close is the next ambulance to our town. You look at staffing levels, of course, but generally you look at the geographic location. Who can get here first? Who can get here the quickest? Now, as if you look at, strictly the location of Willington's ambulance, which is down by Interstate 84, you have a direct shot right into Union. We can be in Union to calls in a lot of cases quicker than we can be to calls in Willington, just because you can get on the highway and you have a straight shot up to there. So geography comes into play. And again, like I mentioned, staffing comes into play. Now, Stafford has paid staffing. Tolland has paid staffing. Ashford has paid staffing. They all do around us. And Sturbridge certainly has paid staffing. But again, I think, my based on my recollection, there's some reciprocity issues with that. So there's a couple of factors in there, but for Union in their mutual aid plan, now keep in mind, like I mentioned, you have fire mutual aid too. We're first doing Union for fires too, because of how quick we can shoot up the highway and get there. And of course, because we do have the staff that are there. That I'm not going to make believe that's not a consideration. It certainly is. But when you look at as an example, Staffordville, oh my God, that's right next to Union. It's really close. Staffordville does not have a very direct route to get to the town of Union for a fire. They just don't. They have some back roads they have to drive, and if you add into that, weather conditions, winter time, all that stuff's delayed. What are the best roads in the wintertime? The interstates. So for Union, it makes sense to have us for fires and for ambulance mutual aid.
Tyler, it seems to me that the very basis of mutual aid is mutual. Wait a second, I think my internet connection just went down. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Pete, can you just...
It seems to me that the very basis of mutual aid is mutual, and the mutuality with Union for medical response seems to be lacking. It seems to be a one-way trip. It's not mutual. It's we're aiding them. Are they our first responders for fire mutual aid?
No. Because no. And when you look at your development of mutual aid plans, you look at all the conditions which I just mentioned to you.
Right.
And when you look at Wellington's case, anywhere in Wellington, you are with the exception of Stafford, like North Wellington, you're surrounded by paid departments. They can get there quicker. Union's case, because they don't have any paid staff, they have to go from wherever they are to the firehouse to get a fire truck to bring it.
Mm-hmm.
Where Tolland, Yukon, Mansfield, those guys are in the firehouses and ready to go. So that's a consideration. To your point, though, Pete,
you see what I was saying there, though.
I do, but to your point, I don't want to use the phrase in a flippant way. You win some, you lose some. I mentioned a statistic before that we provided mutual aid to Yukon 3 times last year. They came to Wellington 55.
Right. I understand that.
And Mike knows this. When Yukon comes to Wellington for a mutual aid call, that is a very, very expensive proposition for Yukon Fire Department to absorb, because they're doing callbacks because they're coming to Wellington.
Right.
So not only do you have, and to your point, you have, well, these guys are going to Wellington and we have to pay them. Now you're paying, Mike, minimum 2-man callback?
Depending on what staffing is on at the time.
Yeah, so they're getting double whacked. Where we don't do, and that was actually one of your questions down farther, we don't do callbacks or anything, or because it's just not financially feasible. So you do win some, you lose some. We went through many times back in, right when I became chief, so it had to be 96, 97, 98, somewhere around there, where Stafford, and I'll I can talk about this even though Alex was sitting here as a head of Stafford ambulance too. They didn't have any paid staff. We were running 38 to 45 calls a month in Stafford. Remember those days, Mike?
Yes.
And we like, whoa, wait a minute. To your point, Pete, this is the mutual aid. We're not getting anything. This is kind of lopsided. That's a lot of calls.
Tyler, I hate to interrupt you here, but Stephanie has been raising her hand
I'm
for
sorry.
minutes now, so I want to get to Stephanie's question.
I just wanted to go at it a little bit different way and get back to the ambulance because, you said there's like 80 calls in Union out of 800 total, and there's 600 people in Union and about 6,000 in Wellington. So it's roughly population and calls is equal. It's about 10%. Our cost that is not covered by the patients and the insurance cost on calls is like 73%. Anyway, it's the figure that we were working off of was it's around 500,000, 482,000. 10% of that is 48,000, which is not peanuts. So I guess the question is, that seems like a fair share, especially if you can't afford to have mutual emergency services to sort of, be in the group of people who do mutual services for each other in the towns around here. It seems like you should be willing to pay something for your emergency coverage for your citizens. And that seems like a pretty modest, simple way of doing the math. I'm not saying that's the number, but to me, that's the reason for having the discussion. and with Union. And I also feel like, to Mr. Gantick's point about the Board of Finance's role, that we very much have been elected officials to look out for the concerns of the taxpayers in Wellington who are paying this whole freight now. So I think, I want to say that I think that you are coming from the standpoint of wanting to provide emergency services for a town that basically doesn't have its own, or isn't on a par with what even Wellington is, but certainly not with the region. And I applaud that. And I'm not saying don't go when someone's life is in danger. I would never say that. But I think that it's reasonable for the taxpayers in Wellington to have the question, why can't Union kick in its proportional share of that cost that taxpayers in Wellington are paying to provide these services, particularly ambulance?
And I think I understand what you're saying. I think a counter to that would be that since 2008, the administration of the fire department has been comfortable with the fact that the collection of bringing in of $30,000 was an adequate trade-off. And again, we're remove the PSA or the requirement we have to go there and look at it from an entire mutual aid perspective. We have to go wherever we're asked. It's just the way it is. That's the system that we operate in, and we are collecting the 30,000, which goes in to benefit both departments. So,
but that 30,000 is the insurance benefit cost, right? I mean, the insurance part of the cost.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
Which
the part that I'm
saying.
saying. The 50,000 is beyond that. We also get the insurance cost at something like 27% of the cost of operating an ambulance in full is what the user cost or the user copay or whatever is for that service. But it's that other 73%, the majority of providing the emergency service, that the taxpayers bear.
I hear what you're saying, Stephanie. That you have to be. I think if as a mental consideration, you have to be a little careful and understand that this is a slippery slope, because I just gave you some figures before regarding UConn, that they came to us 3 times last year, or we went to them 3 times. They came 55. How would the Board of Finance feel if you got a mandate from the University of Connecticut that says, "Hey, you're going to pay us for our animals to come to you"? It's a slippery slope. That's all I'm saying. And again, there's ebbs and flows to this. As we've many years ago, there weren't a lot of paid firefighter EMTs. A lot of these stations weren't manned, and that has changed a little bit. But if for whatever reason that we had a major development at Exit 71, one time an amphitheater was going on or something up there many years ago, and all of a sudden we have these big rock concerts up there, and we're having hundreds of calls up to this thing. Yes, it's mutual aid, but at some point you're like, hey, wait a minute. So if we're going to if we're going to consider or have a discussion about the fact that Union perhaps again, for discussion's sake, should, on top of the 30 that we're collecting from the calls, should kick in what, for lack of a better phrase, I'll call a retainer. We have some mutual aid partners such as UConn that are expending double and triple what it's costing us when you break it down, that are going to want to make us pay a retainer too.
I think it's really a different scenario comparing UConn to us and us to Union. I really do. I think it's similar in that we're talking about small towns that are trying to provide services versus the state's flagship university. I think it's a little bit, that's apples to oranges to some degree to me. But the
call volumes are facts.
Right.
The call. I mean, facts don't care about your feelings. They're facts. That's what they are. So that's all I'm saying. It's a consideration before we take more of a deeper dive into this. That what you're talking about is potentially impacting the entire mutual aid system that's been in place, and you're going to start commingling.
No, I don't think I'm saying that at all. I think what makes us different is the PSA agreement we've had with Union for 13 years. That basically says we're your guys. we're going to be there for you. We're going to do this service for you with, you know, there's a commitment there when you go into the PSA agreement that's different from the mutual aid.
Well, so, and not to belabor this anymore, so do away with the PSA. So if for whatever reason, we were able to back away from the PSA for whatever reason, which will not happen, OEMS says, yeah, that's fine, don't worry about it. We're gonna leave an open PSA. We're still gonna go there 80 times a year, it doesn't matter. We're gonna be sent under mutual aid.
So Tyler, I think you've illuminated that point very well. I would like to, I think Matt had a question that we've been on for a couple minutes. You're all set, Matt? Okay. Tyler, we've kind of been all over the place here. Have we, hang
I
on.
think you asked a question about where do we typically transport to?
Yes, I'm sorry.
There was actually two more questions. So Johnson Hospital, 54% of the time, Rockville 18, Harrington 9, Hartford 9, Manchester 4, and others are 7%. So there were, out of that 80 calls that we responded to, this is an important point too, folks. The 80 calls we responded, there were only 46 transports from the town to Union to a hospital.
Okay.
So the last question was, what are the costs are incurred when you go to units such as staffing callbacks? We don't perform any callbacks. We don't staff up, like I mentioned, like UConn does. Mansfield, depending on the type of call, what type of event it is, they'll do some callbacks. But we typically don't do that. As far as the expenditures, the only thing that we suppose we could throw in there would be medical supplies, which, as you know, Mike, on a serious call, it's much more of an expensive proposition versus a psychological problem. We're not really spending anything.
Right. So the purpose of that question really was, are there expenses that are unique to the trip to Union? And it seems like what you're saying is there's very little that's unique to the trip to Union.
No, even,
You're
and as I
going to
mentioned,
typically the same hospitals, so the round
Yeah.
distance is not greatly larger.
yeah.
There's obviously wear and tear, fuel, aid in the ambulance, or tires, or medical equipment you use at any
Yeah.
cost. There's nothing unusual about going to Union.
No. In some cases, like I mentioned before, if it's a call on the highway, geographically, it's actually closer to some locations in Willington, so.
Understood.
And, like I mentioned before, from a labor perspective, the staff are being paid, whether they're at the firehouse, whether they're in Lion Manor, or whether they're in Union. So whether they're
Right.
sitting or going to Union,
Pete Tanaka's got a question.
Just a quick question, and this is a question from pure ignorance. Is there an insurance remittance on a call where there is no transport?
No, Alex is looking because there's some new information from Williams on that. So I'm gonna let Alex answer that. Stand by. Let me just make sure I turn my volume down.
So as of June 1st, we were just notified that we can start billing for going out and doing lift assists, patient refusal. So if we go to an accident, we can actually charge the person that we did that. It's much less than what we would get for a transport. I think it's $200 per call, providing that person will actually give us their insurance info.
Okay.
That's all new to us. It's just gone into place, so we're still trying to learn how to do that with our billing company. It was something that none of us knew was coming from the state.
I really had no idea because I'd never had to deal with that before. But what that brings up is that we went to 40 calls in Union, which we didn't get paid for at all.
Correct. And now we'll be able to charge for them.
All right.
The outlook looks bright, Pete.
Matt, you have a question?
Yeah, forgive me for not knowing the nomenclature, but what's a callback? You go there once, you go.
A callback is defined as, so as an example, if there's some departments, if there's a structure fire and they're out and they're operating at this structure fire, some towns or departments will actually call additional paid staff in to man the firehouse while they're performing the function at the fire. They'll backfill.
Yeah.
A callback is like a backfill.
So Matt, in Tyler's example before about UConn coming to Willington, when UConn goes mutual aid in an ambulance especially as they get further away from campus, they backfill their staffing. So because they want the campus covered, because on a busy day, there's 30,000 people at the campus. So they're trying to cover home plate by bringing more staffing in, which means that ambulance call essentially creates 2 more people on overtime typically.
On overtime, right?
Do we do that when
No,
when our people are out?
no,
That's what the question was. His answer is they don't backfill.
no. There have been a couple of extenuating circumstances, but for major events, but we absolutely have no practice of doing that. It's just not cost effective. You know,
Thanks.
for the amount of calls that we have, it's just not cost effective.
Thanks.
But like Tyler, in the case of fire coverage though, we like, I know Wellington sometimes sends staff to Mansfield to cover to backfill their empty stations when they're over here helping us out, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mutual aid. Yep. That's station coverage during a fire where they want a fire truck. They don't want the staff necessarily, but the fire truck in their firehouse. Yeah. So we do perform that as well. And we don't call back people to backfill our station for that. So that is, you know, again, you win some, you lose some. Those are times where, yes, Pete, the stations are uncovered when we're doing a cover assignment. There's no doubt about it. The paid staff are out of town providing coverage to, you know, Tolland or Yukon or Mansfield or wherever. Yep. But the same thing happens when we have a fire. We have departments that come to us and cover, you know, our stations, plus both us and Wellington Hill.
Okay. Any more board questions for specifically about the ambulance and union, that particular part of the conversation? Because I think we have a couple topics here still. Matt?
Are we familiar with any other towns that simply do not provide any service to their residents at all? I mean, Union does not provide any service to its residents.
Yeah, they provide what you call an R1 service. They do have EMTs that respond to the scene. The only thing that sets us apart is that they don't have a transport ambulance. They don't have an ambulance. That's all. They do respond and go to the calls. They just don't transport. They don't have a physical ambulance that they own.
Oh, so they have a fire department in Union?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
And so they don't have an ambulance, so we do that. So they have EMTs on their staff
A couple. There's a couple different levels of certification. You have MRTs and EMTs, or EMRs, excuse me, I'm dating myself. But they have a couple of EMTs. They're mostly EMRs, so they're not qualified or legally authorized to perform, you know, in any ambulance by themselves.
Are there any other towns in Connecticut that don't have ambulances?
Eastford.
Sure, Eastford. When it's my understanding is kind of predominant out really like the small towns of the Litchfield Hills, Litchfield County out that way. There are some that don't have ambulances. You know, Hampton Chaplain is a town, they utilize Willimantic.
And do those towns pay anything other than the residents paying through insurance company? Is there any precedent for this in other places?
Well, I know Eastford pays. I'm not exactly sure what they pay. As far as the other ones that we mentioned, you know, Hampton Chaplain, I don't know what they pay. It's just something that if you'd like us to certainly, you know, explore and get some more information, we'd be happy to do that. It's not a heavy lift. We can do that.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay. Any more questions on this topic here? Okay. I did want to address the letter from President Gantic. Specifically, I think that almost the entire letter is based on some misunderstandings. I think, Ron, you can see from this conversation that this is just a conversation about trying to understand this and wanting to talk to Union about their feelings about it. You made the comment that the letter used the tone of threatening to cease services. That is absolutely ridiculous for you to make that accusation. If you think back to the meeting of February 11th, and you can go to the YouTube channel and watch the video, you participated regularly in the discussion on February 11th. We repeatedly said, we value the service. We're not looking to cease services. We are only looking to have a conversation about the funding. I repeated that in my letter written on behalf of the board to the selectmen and to the town of Union. We are not looking to cease services. We are assuring you of that. We're only looking to talk about the funding because it's our job as the Board of Finance to make good decisions about Wellington taxpayer money. You mentioned the contract. that the Willington has with the fire departments, you're absolutely right. It says that the fire departments will make the operational decisions. You are absolutely correct about that. Again, we are not trying to make an operational decision for you. We are just wanting to invite everyone to a conversation about the money. We're not even making a funding decision at this point. We're only asking to talk about money with the town of Union. A lot of accusations about not involving the fire department or getting your permission. I don't believe this board needs permission of a department that submits a budget request to look into how to best fund that request and to talk to another town. However, even if we do need permission, if you go back to the video on the YouTube channel of the February 11th meeting, your chief, Chief Moore, said on his own volition, I think if you want to have a conversation about getting funding from Union, that would be a great idea for the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance to talk to the town of Union. So your chief representing your department suggested it, and you were participating in that meeting. I watched the video again today to be sure that I wasn't losing my mind. And it's right there. You're in the conversation. You participated throughout that conversation. So I don't really understand why it seemed so offensive to you, and I don't want anyone to be offended. We're just trying to do a good job of understanding where the Willington taxpayers' money goes. We are not trying to offend anybody. And I just don't understand why it seemed everyone was so upset about that situation. So I really want to clear up any misunderstandings. We are not looking to rain on your parade or make operational decisions. We're just trying to understand the money stuff, which is a lot of what this conversation tonight was with Tyler, understanding how it's spent, what happens, and why we're there.
If it's okay with you, Mike, I'll answer a couple of questions or some of the comments that you made. To be honest with you, the fact that the correspondence was sent to Union, really without the cooperation of the fire department did raise some concerns. We may have a subtle disagreement or a disagreement period on whether the Board of Finance or you as the chairman, should or can be involved in what we would deem operational issues. So we were, I was very intimately involved in the development of the contractual agreement between the town and the two fire departments. And, Christina was the first selectman at the time. And when you look at the language of that, it's very, very clear and distinct to us anyway, that, we are a private contractor to the town of Willington. The operations, the agreements that are made are between the private corporation and the anybody else that we want to work with for the most part. Now, I understand that there's certainly considerations there from a financial perspective, and I get that. But we were really put off that the communication was sent really without further discussion with us being involved and at the table. In regards to the the issue.
Hang on a second, Tyler. I need to respond to that. I just went over this again.
Okay.
And representatives of your department were in every meeting and you were on every email. You guys were included. You were there. Your chief said, I think the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen should reach out to the union directly. And that is exactly what we did. And we CC'd you on every communication.
And the Board of Selectmen, to my knowledge, the Board of Selectmen did reach out. The Board of Selectmen and the fire chief had a discussion with the town of Union, which for whatever reason, Mike, was not satisfactory to you and or the board. So you pushed the issue a little bit farther without our intimate knowledge or being involved.
So this is interesting information, Tyler, because the information we got from Erica was that she communicated with the town of Union, despite the fact that our letter to the Board of Selectmen and our motion was for all of us to meet together, Selectmen, Fire Department, and the town of Union. So Erica reached out. We realized there was a misunderstanding. I thought our letter was worded very clearly, but for whatever reason, it went out. Now you're telling me the fire department was involved in that conversation also. So now what
he was, I think Alex just
got left out.
He was not involved. He was not involved in that conversation.
If you'd like me to jump in real quick, I have spoken to Chief Eaton afterwards. I was not involved in that meeting.
Okay.
The
So-
Board of Selectmen asked me to start a conversation, so I did that and I reported back to you and the Board of Selectmen what transpired during that conversation.
The Board of Finance specifically in writing said to open a line of communication with us included. It said CC us on an email or include us in the conversation, which is not what happened. But regardless, all the Board of Finance was doing by reaching out again was saying, we did not end up getting involved in this conversation for whatever reason. And we still want to have a conversation with the town. We want to hear something from the town of Union about whether you want to talk or not. We want to be able to have a conversation with the town union, which is why we reached back out. We are trying to do our job. We're trying to follow our mission of making sure that we understand how the tax dollars are spent. And you're correct, Tyler, in saying that the contract says, essentially, we're very much boiling it down, but basically it says the town of Wellington is paying this service provider, Wellington Fire Department #1, to provide certain services to the town. You're absolutely right. And we don't have a lot of say and shouldn't have a lot of say about some of the internal workings of that. You are a private corporation. But the town of Wellington, through that contract, is saying we are paying you to provide services to the town of Wellington. We are not paying you to provide services to the town of Union, correct? Right? Like that's not in the contract.
Well, it doesn't say you're supposed to provide services mutual to anybody.
Right. But we have this back and forth about it's a private or it's public, it's a contract, you guys pay us. If any other town organization that was provided with funding from the taxpayers of Wellington was providing essentially what is a one-way service to another town, if Wellington Hill Fire Department said, you know, we like the side of Mansfield that's north of Yukon, and Mansfield moved their staffing during COVID down to their other station south of Yukon, maybe Wellington Hill wants to cover that section of Mansfield. Now the taxpayers of Wellington would be paying to cover a section of Mansfield for fire services, maybe. I'm just making things up. Then I think it would be an appropriate conversation for the Board of Finance to say, why are Wellington taxpayer dollars going there? Not that they can't, but why are they going there, and help us understand it? And maybe we should ask Mansfield to chip in. This is the same conversation. And I think the Board of Finance, as a government agency, has the right to contact the government agency of another town.
Well, I think that there's a little bit more to be discussed regarding that. I mean, the contracts are extremely clear regarding if I don't know if you've read the contracts or the rest of the board has read the contracts. There's a statement in there. I'm reading a section of it. The town, will not exercise control or direction over the manner, method of which the departments perform their services. You can take things extremely literally. You can take them, on much more of a broad basis. I think that, if an explanation perhaps that is provided, this is our view. If an explanation was provided and you didn't like the explanation, so it ends up escalating to where we feel you did a total, end run around us. And that's why when you first opened the meeting, I asked you, I said, we sent the letter, we asked that if we want to talk about this, that's certainly fine. It's the issue of whether union pays us or not is almost secondary to our concerns about what we're perceiving as an end run around our organization to talk to, union about an issue that the agreement is between the Wellington Fire Department and union. It's not between the town of Wellington.
But that agreement commits the Wellington taxpayers to funding services in the town of Union by your independent private corporation making that commitment to the town of Union or to the state with the PSA. You are now creating a commitment of Wellington taxpayer dollars to get sent to Union to provide service in Union. It's not that it's wrong.
Well,
it's that
two answers to that though, Mike.
And hang on, let me just finish this line of thought. What you provided tonight is information that we've been asking for 2 budget seasons. We started these questions last year. If you go to the videos last year, we had these conversations with Chief Moore, and to his credit, he was not a participant when this negotiation was made. You were. And so he didn't have a lot of the information. We said, what are the agreements? How did this start? What is the reasoning? Maybe, are there payments coming from Union? Maybe we don't know about it. Help us understand it. He didn't have that information available to him. We asked again this year, and then it built up, and there were a lot of concerns brought up on this board. And again, you were invited, you were participants, your department were participants in all of the conversation. The only email that you were not included on, that your department was not included on, was when I reached back out to Chief Eaton and said, I haven't heard back from you yet. And that was only a follow-up on the previous email that your department was CC'd on at the time it was sent. I reached out to him and said, hey, I haven't heard back from you. Please let me know if you've heard, if you want to participate in the conversation, whatever. I don't remember the exact words, but he responded back. He included your chief and Erica on his response. And so you were brought it back into it. But everything else you guys were participant in. And again, I'm going to reinforce one more time, your chief was in the whole meeting and your president was in the whole meeting in February. And your chief said, I think the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance should reach out to the town of Union. So the idea that we're in trouble now because we didn't ask your permission, your chief gave us permission, basically, is what I'm saying. So let's spend the whole night splitting hairs about this. The Board of Finance has a concern. We're trying to get answers. You provided a ton of answers tonight about how it works, about the nuts and bolts. Maybe that is enough for this board. I don't know. We'll discuss it more, but we feel we have a right to reach out to the town of Union and say, hey, Wellington taxpayer dollars are going into your town. We want to talk about it. We didn't send them a bill. We just said we want to talk about it. I don't understand what's so offensive about that.
I can't hear you. You there, Mike?
Yep.
Okay. To your 2 points before, the discussion or the argument can be made that, again, I think you keep saying that you have this dedication, you have this we're locked in union. A PSA is a piece of paper that says basically we're the first Dewey ambulance to provide service up there. And again, we would go there anyway, whether you had a PSA or not, whether a piece of paper or not. And again, the fact of the matter is that it is a revenue stream that we're able to recoup and put back into the Fund 17. So again, like Stephanie made a couple of comments. I want to say it again. You have to be a little bit careful, or I think you should be a little bit careful about how you're handling this. I'm not saying forget whether it's I agree, disagree. It's not the point. The point is that you have mutual aid agreements in place. You have PSAs that are in place. It's a slippery slope. And I go back to the Yukon issue. We went 3, they came 55.
Tyler,
that's a tough thing.
I understand that. And I think we've heard those numbers. And I think we all remember those numbers. This conversation now is about Ron's letter and fire department being upset about our efforts to communicate with Union. The board will decide if we're going to continue this, but at this point, the board has made a motion and voted to try to communicate with Union about this. And I think I hear at least some concern about board members that we try to have a conversation with Union. Certainly we can go back to the board. If there's nothing else, Ron, if you don't want to speak about your letter, that's fine. I wanted you to have the opportunity. I hope something I said helped tonight. It maybe doesn't seem like it.
Well, there's a couple of things that you mentioned before. I mean, when you look at the content of the letter, Mike, one of the you did mention in the letter that there was I'm paraphrasing, that you don't want to see ambulance service cease in the town of Union. And I will tell you that was taken as a veiled threat that, hey, if you're not going to comply, we're not going to provide service. You wrote it. It was there.
Tyler, you and I and Ron Gantic have known each other for what, 40 years? And that's a creative, that's a very favorable to you interpretation. I said very clearly, as a 40-year or whatever, as a longtime volunteer and career fire person, I want to assure you that we are not looking to cease, because I didn't want anyone misinterpreting it. So
why would you mention it? Why would you even say it?
Because I was afraid people would think, because every time we talk about things like this, people say, oh, this is going to be like Stafford, where the town forced a fire department out of business. And I was trying to assure you that that's not the case. I took the extra effort to say, I want to assure you. Now, that was an effort to not have this interpretation happen. Apparently it's backfired, and I apologize.
That wasn't us. That was in the correspondence to the first selectman in Union. That wasn't to us. You wrote that in your correspondence to the town of Union.
It was also in other correspondence too. It was in the original letter to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, I mean, what, in the end, we, like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. We can split some hairs. We need to, if you have a desire to pursue this or any other matter regarding the fire department operations agreements, do it in a manner that we're, we're all partners in this, instead of what ends up being a perceived, end run around us. We're a private corporation. Our name is on that PSA. Our name is on all the other mutual aid agreements as well. We certainly deserve a seat at the table, and we certainly deserve to be part of any correspondence that is being sent, and whether it gets sent or not. I think some of these things can be solved simply by having meetings internally to the town of Willington before they end up going outside, and frankly, potentially causing issues, outside of the town of Willington with some of our partners that we do have good relationships with. That's really the long and short of it. So, if there's continued dialogue, if the board wants to do that, we can certainly talk about it. Our hope is that there's a lot of information that was provided tonight that we can take into account. As far as the letter, I think you didn't admit it, but I think, you do have to acknowledge the fact, and I think you did acknowledge the fact that the choice of words of even mentioning ceasing of operations may not have been the best thing to do. And that's really one of the things that caused us great concern, is that, if it could be viewed as potentially a veiled threat, or if, it was something that definitely raised some eyebrows. Mike, was the best choice of words? Absolutely not. Did you mean it that way? Probably not. But
Tyler,
in some
okay.
arenas, it did come across as being a veiled threat.
Tyler,
But
Where are
I
you?
don't need a lecture.
Where are you?
I think that if you say, I don't want X to happen, you can mean that to mean, I don't want X to happen, or you can mean it as a veiled threat of, I don't want X to happen, but if you don't play ball, we're going to make sure that X doesn't happen. And I am sure in my heart of hearts that when Mike said, I don't want X to happen, he meant, I don't want X to happen. It's not a veiled threat. It's only a veiled threat if you're looking for a veiled threat.
All right, any other
Thanks,
board
Pete.
comments? I think we've beat this subject well past death. All right. The next item is the response from the town of Union. The fire department has seen it, and the board members have seen it. So I don't know if we want to take time to digest after this meeting, and we'll come back to this at the next meeting and decide what to do next, or do we want to charge on with trying to have a sit down with Union, the fire department, and Willington? Do we have some feelings amongst the board members?
Right?
Yes.
I'd really like to see the statistics that Matt asked for every town that does not currently have an ambulance, what they're paying for their coverage. And if every other town that does not have an ambulance is paying nothing, then I think we brought this to a standstill. If it turns out, on the other hand, that Union is the only town that's paying nothing, then I think we definitely need to move forward. But without that data, I don't think we can go anywhere.
So how about this?
We can do that, Mike.
I move to table old business item 4, ambulance service to the town of Union.
I'll second that.
Discussion on the motion? Matt?
Can we ask the fire departments to gather the information? Yeah, and then, yeah.
What would be,
Mike,
pursue that? Do you want an email from
Mike?
Pete, go ahead.
Just for the same reason I didn't vote on the Talmadge property, I think that for conflict of interest, we should probably have somebody at the town office do that.
Mike, you might be able to do that through CCM,
What is it that you want the town to do?
Find out how many towns in the town of in the state of Connecticut do not own an ambulance, and what they're paying for ambulance service. That's probably some information that we can get directly from the state.
I think CCM might be able to be your best bet with that. They have analysts that do that. That might be, Erica, would you mind starting there?
No, absolutely.
Okay, I think that's a good place to start. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, let's vote.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Matt,
I apologize. I'm sorry, everyone. So exactly what are we voting on here? We're
We're
voting,
Yes, the
tabling,
table. I mean,
we're tabling agenda item 4.
thank you. Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Christina,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
6 yes, motion passes.
For the fire department, I thought I had covered the bases, but I do apologize for the distress that has apparently been caused, and that was never my intent. The intent was to try to do a good job with minding the taxpayers' dollars and not to offend anybody. New business. Item 1, senior center AC.
All right, so there's some folks who have stayed on this call now for a couple hours, and so I appreciate them to talk about this item. So the senior center currently has 4 air conditioning units. They are all housed underneath the deck. 2 have failed. So we have 2 that have been repaired to limp along to provide air conditioning in the senior center. It has been stated by multiple vendors who have come out that the placement of those air conditioners should not continue to be underneath that deck. That's causing some of the issue. Hot air rising up right under the deck, coming right back down onto the units. So 2 for sure need to be replaced. The 2 that are limping along will also need to be replaced. My original intent when I asked you to add this onto your agenda was we were going to try to find some dollars that we still had left in this fiscal year budget to replace the air conditioning units at the senior center. But Donna and I, after going through some of the ARP language, believed that this project is directly related to one of the uses, which speaks about ventilation improvements for sure, our senior center and ventilation for senior population. If they ever needed to be in that building for anything, we believe falls under that category. So 2 things I wanted to make you aware. In the event we discover it does not fall there, we don't have a budget for it, we would be coming back to you for dollars. But when we put together a first proposal for how to use those funds, this will be in that first round of usage. And we're looking at estimates upwards of $30,000 to replace all 4 units and move them out from underneath the deck on either their own pad or a cement pad out underneath them. I'll ask, Jenny is on the call, Joe Piatek from the Senior Center, and Troy, our Public Works Director, all involved in this process. If any of them want to share any information that I did not. Did I adequately describe that, Troy?
Yeah, pretty much. The 2 units that currently, there's 4 units there. There's a 3-ton unit, a 3.5, and 2 5-ton units. They all need to be replaced, basically. I was out there with MCOR the other day, and the piping along the building, the units are currently 16 years old now. All needs to be replaced. He basically wants them, he suggests that they be moved out from underneath the deck. One of the problems is those are running, the heat rate there is basically pushing back down on it. They're working twice as hard where they shouldn't be. I was down in the basement the other day with him. The water was leaking out from where the air handlers, the moisture from those 2 units running constantly when we had those couple 90-degree days. But Erica pretty much touched on everything. There was 3 prices, and like they said, they varied up to $30,000 to have it done.
We did plan in this next cycle of CIP to put these out in year 5 and start to progress them into replacement. They failed long before our information from MCOR, who was taking care of them, could, and they believe a lot of that extra effort on the air conditioner's part is because of where they're placed underneath the decking. So I'm not asking you for money right now, but making you aware that when we start looking at the, a first round of spending and ventilation items in numerous town buildings, that this will be on that list. And we really just hope that the 2 units that are functioning over there can make it through. Or I'll be back much sooner.
Okay.
Jenny, did you want to add anything? Or Joe?
I don't have anything to add. I think you covered it sufficiently. I also think it's worth mentioning that Bert Zenowitz is on the call as well. He is the president of the Wellington Seniors Inc. And just we all really want to stress the urgency of this because we need those units, and the seniors can't be in the senior center if there's no air conditioning.
Certainly not in this heat. And so again, we'll start to move in a quicker direction, and we'll have to close the senior center in the event those fail. So, and our quotes have, there's a wide range of numbers we're seeing because some vendors would prefer to put those ductless splits in, but because we have all of the inner workings for the air duct systems, that would be the way to go, replacing the units as they exist.
Okay, so you don't need action from the Board of Finance?
I don't really, but I will be coming back to you soon. So I wanted you to hear about it. Again, we were going to take this from these dollars, but we believe we can use some of these federal dollars for it, and improving ventilation is important. So thank you.
Okay, new business item 2, fiscal year 21 transfers. I have my little sheet from Donna here. Donna, is there anything you need or Erica need to say before we do this, or shall we get right to it?
So we can, I'll talk about the trash. One of the departments that would be overspent is the transfer station. I know last year we came to you and needed additional funding in that department as well. It's the uptick in trash and bulky with people working from home more. We're just seeing an uptick, and it's not just Wellington. Everyone is seeing that. So it's not just contractual issues. It's just a much larger volume of trash now that people are home all day instead of using trash at their offices all day.
Okay, board, well, here, we'll make the motion for discussion. I move that we transfer $10,000 from line item 0111 Selectmen to line item 0351 Transfer Station. Can I get a second?
Second.
Discussion? All right, let's vote.
Christina,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
6 yes, motion passes.
Pete, no conflict of interest on that one?
Nope. Even though I throw out trash.
All right, our second transfer is clearing up an error made in the motion at the last meeting when Chief Moore approached us and asked for some additional funding. We made a motion to appropriate $10,000, but we did not specify where it was coming from, which is obviously important. So I would like to move. Do we have to say this replaces the previous motion?
So men,
No, you would just you're making a new motion. Your old motion just really said you were going to give it. Now you're saying where you're getting it from.
Okay. All right, and that was at the May 20th meeting. Okay, so I move that the previously approved motion from the May 20th, 21 meeting to appropriate money for Wellington Fire Department number 1 be amended to include transferring $10,000 from line item 0831 employee insurances to line item 0004 Wellington Fire Department number 1.
Second,
Discussion on that motion. Let's vote.
Matt,
Yes.
Christina,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Stephanie,
yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
6 yes, motion passes.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Donna, for the help with correcting that. Okay, that concludes new business. Correspondence, as typical, board members have it all in email. And specifically for this month, I wanted to address the letter from Mr. Woodworth that you all have because of some of the specific comments in there that I think it's appropriate that I address them as chairman. Mr. Woodworth, I don't know if you want to speak at all. I see you're on here. If you do, unmute your and jump in.
No, I don't have any answers to any of the questions, so I don't really know where to jump in.
Okay. Then I will do the best I can to answer what I think needs to be addressed. And Mr. Woodworth, if you want to follow up after that, depending on what I answer, you can feel free to reach out directly to me or to the selectmen again, I guess, if you want to. Board members have the letter. I'm just shuffling through my stuff here. Hang on. And I'm not going to address it line by line. I don't believe it deserves that that much detail. And there was some discussion whether I needed to address this because Mr. Woodworth is not a Wellington resident. However, because the letter specifically names me and accuses me of jeopardizing the integrity of my position on the Board of Finance, I did want to briefly address that essentially nothing in the letter is true. The accusations are all untrue. I wish that Mr. Woodworth had asked me when we see each other regularly. I would have been happy to help him answer those questions, and then he could have certainly written the letter after that and saved all this public discourse. But I want to assure the Board of Finance that my involvement with the fire department is kept on the appropriate length leash when I am doing my job here on the board. This was discussed, not these particular topics, but the idea of me as a board member being involved in the fire department has been discussed in the past. It was vetted through the town attorney and myself essentially to determine what are the conflicts of interest, and what it really comes down to is between the comments from the town attorney and other research I've done and talking to my own attorney, board members in town boards often have specific experience. They're often sought after for that specific experience because they understand the workings of sometimes complicated or long running history or organizations in the town. That was one of the reasons I was recruited to run 4 years ago for the Board of Finance, because the people who asked me to run felt that I would understand things like the fire and emergency services in town because of my involvement in them. Because there's the potential of the conflict, I stay away. For example, when the Willington Hill Fire Department that I'm a member of makes the budget that they will present to our board, I stay away from my involvement with the Willington Hill Fire Department in creating the budget. I also make sure that I use the information and the history I have only for making good decisions, or what I feel are good decisions about the use of the money. And the letter from the town attorney specifically commented on the fact that that a conflict comes in when a board member does one of two things. Either comes to a board meeting as a representative of this other organization. For example, if I came to a board meeting and sat in the audience and represented the Willington Hill Fire Department to the board that I'm a member of, that is a direct conflict. Also, if my decisions on the board, if I was sitting at the board table or at the board Zoom meeting in this case, and I was voting on decisions or participating in decisions that would bring me pecuniary interest, as the attorney said, and I had to look that up, and that means financial interest. So if I were to preside over decisions on this board that would somehow give the Willington Hill Fire Department a favor that would then come back to me personally, as in a salary or anything like that, if I got personal benefit, that would also be an ethics violation. None of those situations exist. And I receive no compensation. As a matter of fact, I purposely and intentionally each year, and you all receive a copy of the letter, I ask that I not even be considered for the town's tax abatement, because I feel like some people could interpret that as my involvement in the fire department earns me a tax abatement through the town, but I am also on the Board of Finance, which seems close because it's about finances. Board members have repeatedly said they don't think that's a conflict and I should get the tax abatement I deserve, but I don't feel in my role as the chairman of this board or even on the board that I should do that. So I take the extra step. I believe I've always made sure to act with integrity. As far as the specific accusations in the letter that I have somehow engineered favors for my girlfriend, none of that is true. The person who has worked with the Willington Hill Fire Department to arrange to use the house has gotten no special deals. And as a matter of fact, is not yet even living in the house. The last person to live and sleep in that house is Fire Chief Alex Moore from the Willington 1 Fire Department, who was there during COVID isolation. And that's not in any way an accusation or calling him out. I'm just pointing out that he is the last person to sleep in that house. So all these accusations in this letter are simply false. I would also like to ask if Chief Snyder is still here. Your department was accused along in this. I don't know if there's anything you want to add for comments now so that we can address this to assure the Board of Finance that there aren't any shenanigans here.
Yeah, real briefly. Again, like you stated earlier, I wish, David, we've been friends for a long time. I wish you'd come to me directly with questions when you put them in there that directly are involving me in the fire department. Like Mike was saying, we had predetermined a rental amount with the anticipation of trying to rent the house across the street. And in doing that, we talked to realtors, a couple of different realtors, to say, okay, how much do we charge? And that's the number that was set for this agreement. Again, like Mike said, there's nobody in the house. We do have an agreement. And we're hoping that it goes forward because the house would be a great revenue source to put or offset budget. That's the only intention for any kind of money coming in for that. In terms of the other questions that you have, Dave, about the tax exempt status, it's in our tax exempt application that we can use the house temporarily for people in need. And so it doesn't violate the tax exempt status at all. And also in the zoning, same thing. It doesn't affect that whatsoever because we're not using the property at this point for dual use. We don't have anybody living there, but if we did, say it was today, we don't have a permit to use the hall. And if we did, we are not using the hall, the church. So again, I don't know if there's anything else that you want me to address directly, but these are things that were, like I said, on your letter that, again, involve us directly that you could have just come and asked me. And I don't know if anybody else has any more questions on the property or anything that we're doing with it at this point. We'd certainly put everything through the town and the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen to be completely transparent, whether it's funding or money coming in or going out or what will we do with it. So I don't know if you have any more questions.
I have one question for you, Chief.
Go ahead,
Are your
Pete.
meetings back open to the public or are we still closed due to COVID?
Our meetings, we just started, and they're always open to the public. They're always open to the public, and you can come down. We just started meeting in person. They've never been closed, but we really didn't have a lot of meetings when we couldn't meet in public. We did a few online like this, but not a lot.
Right, so it's like the second Tuesday of the month or something, is that correct?
The fourth Tuesday of the month. Fourth Tuesday of the
all
month,
right.
and the hall is open, and it's open to the public. Anybody can come down, and you're welcome to come in and ask all the questions.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the chief over here? Or for me?
One question I have, Tom, is the letter implies that the town maybe should be in line for any income that comes off that property. So I just wanted to be sure that my understanding's clear, that the property is owned free and clear by Wellington Hill Fire Department
That's
without
correct.
ownership by the town.
That's correct. And that was the understanding when the taxpayers, we went to town meeting and the taxpayers chipped in a small portion to purchase the property. It's just like everything else that we do over here. It's now just one big fire department here and across the street. That when we bring in money from the chicken barbecue, it's the same situation that we're looking at the same way. It doesn't need to be turned back over to anybody. It's used for the membership, and it's used for equipment. It's used for all kinds of stuff like that. So that's our intent for any other income that we can generate.
Any other questions for the chief or for me? Okay.
Christina.
I
Yeah.
was just wondering, it's been a long time since I've seen the fire department contract with the town. And I'm not sure if everybody on this board has seen it, but maybe it'd be a good time to look at that again. Because both of these issues that we talked about tonight seem to be relevant. And with that, like, whose responsibility is it to even look at these things? So I think that would be good if we could all get a copy.
Erica, would you be able to send that to the board? Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's go to present to speak. As before, present to speak, if you, well, I guess it's only board members who are on video at this point. If you would like to speak, unmute, call out your name. Yeah. Okay, people are leaving me. Oh, Michelle, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you to you, Mr. McCoo, for handling the last issue with such transparency and tact. I've always found you to be very fair-minded, and I think that transparency is the only way to handle these types of issues when they come up. I think there's no way that we can ever prevent unwarranted gossip from transferring into the public sphere. But I think we all have to take a deep breath and think twice about taking something to the next level until we've had a chance to actually find some of the answers. And we should just start first with a simple question and speak to the people who are involved and ask them. So I appreciate the fact that you handled that with such transparency tonight.
Thank you. Anybody else? I don't think we have any other present to speak then. Good and welfare. I guess this has not been the easiest meeting. I've found myself in a couple situations I didn't really expect, and they're good learning lessons for me. And hopefully this board gets something good out of all of this. And thank you all for grinding through it. Peter?
I'm just waiting my cue.
Okay. you have your cue.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Can I get a second? Got a second from Matt. All right, everyone who says aye, please wave. Say
Aye.
Aye, bye.
good night, everybody.